Welcome to the shadows. This is MrsSinister, where terrifying tales lull you to sleep. Cody liked Halloween. Every year, he looked forward to putting on a silly costume, going out with his friends, and collecting free candies around the neighborhood. He wasn't into the dark, creepy parts of the holiday. What he loved was the atmosphere, the decorations, the costumes, the cool October air. His parents and siblings were different. They weren't the festive type. Halloween for them was more of a responsibility than an occasion. They would dutifully leave a bowl of candy by the front door or hand them out with forced smiles, but beyond that, they saw it as nothing more than an unnecessary expense and an inconvenience. That was why this year felt different. For some reason, his parents were more engaged. Maybe it was the new neighbors, with their elaborate decorations, or maybe they just felt like joining in for once. They bought new displays for the front yard, including creepy tombstones, fake cobwebs, orange string lights, and even one of those expensive animatronic figures. A shrieking ghoul with motion sensors that let out an ear-piercing scream whenever anyone got too close. Cody helped set it all up, testing each prop, arranging them on the lawn, and placing the ghoul right beside the walkway so trick-or-treaters couldn't miss it. He felt proud of the display. It was the most Halloween spirit their house had ever shown, and he was excited to be a part of it. But then, a family emergency happened. Cody's dad got a call from his older brother. Something serious had happened. The kind of situation that required them to leave immediately. His parents and oldest brother packed up and drove off that same afternoon. They would be staying with his uncle for 2 days. That left Cody with his older sister. She was supposed to stay home with him on Halloween night, but she already had plans of her own. She was going to a friend's party and made it clear she wouldn't be back until the next morning. That left Cody alone in the house on Halloween night. He didn't mind too much. He wasn't allowed to go trick-or-treating anymore because of his age, but this gave him a new role to play. He would be the one handing out candies, enjoying the decorations, and watching horror movies in peace. As night fell, the neighborhood came alive. Kids in costumes flooded the streets with their baskets and pillowcases. Parents followed behind with flashlights and cameras. The air was filled with laughter, distant shrieks from animatronics, and the crunch of leaves underfoot. Cody positioned himself by the door, bowl of candy in hand, ready to greet trick-or-treaters. Each time a group approached, the motion sensor ghoul would shriek, making the kids jump and laugh. He spent the evening giving away candies, complimenting costumes, and occasionally looking outside to admire the bustling street. The TV inside played a scary movie in the background, but he was too busy with the door to pay much attention. By 10 o'clock, the stream of trick-or-treaters slowed to a trickle. He turned off the front yard lights, signaling that the house was done for the night. Only a few pieces of candy were left in the bowl. He ate some, put the rest away, and cleaned up the entryway. By midnight, the house was silent. His sister still hadn't returned, which was expected. He locked all the doors, checked the windows, and headed upstairs. He scrolled through his phone in bed for a while, the faint sounds of the horror movie still playing downstairs, echoing faintly through the house. Eventually, his eyes grew heavy and he drifted off. He didn't know what time it was when the knocking started. It was loud and sharp, coming from the front door. He startled awake, heart thumping, and checked the clock on his bedside table. It was a little past 3 in the morning. He groaned, assuming it was his sister who had forgotten her keys. She had done it before. He got out of bed, trudged down the stairs, and peered through the peephole. No one was there. He frowned. The porch was empty. The yard was still. The street was quiet. He waited for a moment, thinking maybe whoever knocked had already walked away, but there was no movement. The air outside looked colder, heavier than earlier, as if the Halloween energy had been sucked away, leaving only a strange, heavy silence. He considered opening the door to check, but decided against it. He locked the deadbolt again and went back upstairs. Before settling back into bed, he heard a new sound. A faint creaking, like something moving outside the back of the house. His room faced the street, so he went to the hallway and looked out the window at the backyard. He saw nothing but darkness. The knocking didn't return, but the house felt different now. He picked up his phone and called his sister, asking where she was. She answered sleepily, telling him she'd be home in the morning as planned. Nothing out of the ordinary. That didn't explain the knocking. He remembered the CCTV system his parents had installed months ago. It was connected to the front and back of the house, viewable from the small monitor in the living room. He went downstairs again, turned on the screen, and waited for the feed to come up. Instead of the usual grainy night vision footage, the screen showed only black. No signal. He felt a knot form in his stomach. The cameras had been working earlier in the night. He checked them briefly when setting up the displays. Now, nothing. He froze when he heard footsteps. Slow, deliberate steps on the grass outside, moving toward the side of the house. He turned off the living room light and pressed himself against the wall, listening. The footsteps circled to the back. He gathered the courage to peek through the kitchen window toward the backyard. That was when he saw it. Standing near the center of the yard was a figure. Small, child-sized, dressed in a costume. It wore a mask. A creepy, exaggerated grin. It looked like one of the trick-or-treaters from earlier, except it was standing completely still, staring toward the house. Cody's breath caught in his throat. The figure didn't move. For a moment, he thought maybe some kid got lost and wandered into the backyard by accident. Maybe it was a prank. But who would be wandering around at 3 in the morning, alone, standing silently like that? His mind tried to explain it. Halloween was a night of weird things. Maybe it was the spirit of a child who died while trick-or-treating, wandering the neighborhood. He'd heard urban legends like that before. A ghostly child looking for a home to visit one last time. A soul that never left. The thought chilled him. If it really was a ghost, what could he do? Ghosts didn't eat candy. There was no treat he could give to send it away. And if it decided to play a trick, what would that mean? He backed away from the window and ran upstairs. He turned off all the lights, locked his bedroom door, and climbed into bed, heart pounding. He pulled the blanket over his head like a child, listening intently to every sound outside. The footsteps came and went, circling the house, sometimes faint, sometimes closer. He didn't sleep for the rest of the night. When morning finally came, light spilling through the windows, he felt like he had been holding his breath for hours. His sister returned around 8, yawning, carrying leftover snacks from the party. She immediately noticed the front yard. Every single Halloween decoration had been slashed. The fake tombstones were broken, the string lights torn down, the cobwebs ripped apart. The expensive animatronic ghoul had been gutted, wires hanging loosely from its chest. It looked like someone had taken a knife to everything in sight. Cody told her about the knocking, the footsteps, and the masked kid in the backyard. She listened, but instead of thinking about ghosts, she picked up the phone and called the police. Later that day, they learned what had really happened. A man wearing a mask had been prowling the neighborhood that night. He had gone from house to house, cutting camera wires and slashing decorations, looking for a way in. He had tried several doors and windows, but found them locked. No one had been harmed, but the man had been carrying a knife. The police believed he was planning to rob houses, using the chaos of Halloween as cover. He had done the same to several other homes nearby. Cody realized then that the figure he had seen wasn't a ghost at all. It was a man, not a child spirit, wandering the night, but someone living, breathing, dangerous. He had been standing in the backyard, watching the house, waiting for a chance to get inside. The idea of a lost spirit was frightening, but the reality was worse. Ghosts couldn't hurt you the way a man with a knife could. Minnie had always taken pride in how she raised her children. She believed in giving them freedom, responsibility, and the ability to figure things out on their own. She'd grown up in a house where everything was controlled, where her parents' rules were absolute, and where there was little room to breathe. As a child, Halloween had meant curfews, planned costumes, and supervised trick-or-treating that felt more like a military operation than a night of fun. So, when she became a parent, she vowed things would be different. Her 3 kids, Keisha, the eldest, Jordan, the middle child, and little Mia, were raised to be independent. If they wanted a costume, they made it themselves with whatever scraps they could find. If they wanted candy, they planned their route and walked the neighborhood with friends. Minnie would watch from the porch, trusting them, letting them experience childhood the way she never had. Halloween has always been smooth. Every year, they'd go out, come home by 10, dump their candy piles on the kitchen floor, and Minnie would laugh at their sugar highs. This year was no different. At least, that's what she thought. The weather was clear and crisp. The neighborhood was buzzing with excitement. Decorations hung from trees, plastic skeletons swayed in the wind, and lights of orange and purple glowed from every house. Her kids were thrilled. Keisha had made her own witch costume, complete with a floppy hat and tattered skirt. Jordan wore a homemade superhero cape with his initials crudely stitched on. Mia wore a cardboard box painted to look like a robot. Their friends gathered outside, giggling and comparing candy buckets, and soon enough, the group of kids disappeared into the night like every other Halloween. Minnie felt no worry. This was how it always went. Hours passed with no problems. Minnie watched a Halloween movie on TV, checked her phone occasionally, and peeked outside now and then, listening to the distant laughter of trick-or-treaters. At around 9:45, she heard the familiar chatter of children returning. Her kids were home, laughing, their costumes slightly disheveled, their buckets heavy with loot. Keisha led the pack, as always. Minnie greeted them at the door, made a little joke about who got the most candy, and ushered them inside. The kids sat on the kitchen floor, as was tradition, and began sorting their candies. Minnie began making hot chocolate, enjoying the moment, thinking about how lucky she was that things were so simple and safe. Then Keisha went pale. At first, Minnie thought she was just tired from walking. But then Keisha clutched her stomach and leaned forward, retching violently onto the tiled floor. The other kids jumped back, startled. Minnie rushed to her, holding her hair back, murmuring reassurances, even though she felt a small knot of fear twist in her gut. It happened fast. Too fast. Keisha's breathing became shallow, her eyes glassy. Minnie helped her onto the couch, thinking it might have been too much candy, maybe something expired, but Keisha wasn't recovering. Her lips looked faintly bluish. She began to shake. Before Minnie could even process what was happening, one of Keisha's friends stumbled forward and vomited too. Then another child doubled over, clutching their stomach. Panic began to creep in. Minnie's mind tried to find a rational explanation. Food poisoning? Bad candy? It had to be something like that. But then she heard shouting outside. It wasn't just in her house. She ran out the door and saw chaos. Neighbors were spilling into the street. Parents carrying their children, some limp, some crying, some violently ill. The festive Halloween night atmosphere was gone, replaced by sirens in the distance and the frantic cries of families. Minnie's neighbor, Mrs. Larson, was on the front lawn with her son, who was pale and vomiting into the grass. 2 doors down, a father was shouting for someone to call an ambulance. Everywhere she looked, kids were sick, parents were confused, and no one knew what was going on. Minnie grabbed her phone and called emergency services. Her voice was shaking, but the dispatcher told her ambulances were already on their way. As she hung up, she could hear the distant wail of sirens growing louder. She rushed back inside to check on her kids. Jordan was sitting silently, staring at Keisha with wide eyes. Mia was crying softly. Keisha was barely responsive now. Minnie wrapped her in a blanket and held her close until the paramedics arrived. The neighborhood looked like something out of a nightmare. Flashing lights painted the houses red and blue. Paramedics rushed from house to house, carrying children on stretchers, checking pulses, administering oxygen. Police officers went door to door, asking parents questions, trying to get some kind of information. Minnie stood on her lawn, holding Mia, watching as Keisha was lifted into an ambulance. Jordan followed, holding his sister's hand. Minnie climbed in after them. The hospital was crowded when they arrived. It seemed like dozens of children from their neighborhood had been brought in, all with similar symptoms. Doctors and nurses moved quickly, administering treatments, setting up IV drips, calming frantic parents. Minnie sat in the corner of the emergency room, her hands gripping her knees tightly. She could hear snippets of conversations. Words like contaminated, unknown substance, spiked. A police officer came by to ask her questions, where they had trick or treated, whether they'd noticed anything strange, if any of the candies looked tampered with. Minnie tried to remember, but everything blurred together. When the doctors stabilized Keisha, Minnie felt a flicker of relief. She walked down the hospital corridor and saw other parents she recognized from her street. Some were crying. Some were furious. Others sat in stunned silence. The entire neighborhood had been hit. Later, the police and health investigators pieced it together. Some of the candies had been tampered with. Tiny puncture holes, almost invisible to the naked eye, were found in some wrappers. Someone had used a syringe to inject drugs into the candies. The substance was dangerous, but not lethal in the amounts given, though it easily could have been if not treated in time. The realization sent a cold shiver through Minnie's body. All those candies, handed out innocently from house to house, mixed together in buckets, traded between kids. Any one of them could have held the dangerous dose. The most terrifying part was that no one knew who had done it. The police couldn't trace it back to any particular house. The candy had been mixed up so thoroughly that there was no single source. They suspected someone had walked around earlier in the day, tampering with candy left in unattended bowls, slipping altered sweets into unsuspecting buckets, or handing them out briefly before disappearing. No witnesses had seen anything. No cameras had caught anything suspicious. For days, the news talked about it. Parents from other neighborhoods were horrified. Social media exploded with theories. Some said it was a prank gone wrong. Others believed it was the work of a malicious stranger who wanted to hurt children. The police offered rewards for information, but nothing came. The perpetrator was never found. Minnie stayed at the hospital for 2 nights with Keisha. She didn't sleep much. She kept replaying the night over and over again in her head. She thought about how proud she had been, how she had told herself her children could handle themselves. how she believed their neighborhood was safe. She had wanted to give them freedom, but now she couldn't shake the feeling that her trust had been taken advantage of. When they returned home, the Halloween decorations were still up. The fake cobwebs were tangled in the bushes. The carved pumpkins were starting to rot, and the empty candy wrappers were scattered on the floor where the kids had left them. It all felt wrong now, like remnants of something that used to be fun but had been tainted forever. Minnie sat in the living room that night after the kids were asleep, staring at the decorations. She blamed herself, even though everyone told her it wasn't her fault. She kept thinking that if she had been more careful, if she had inspected the candies, if she had gone with them, maybe it wouldn't have happened. Halloween has always been a night of laughter for them. Now, when Minnie thought of it, all she could remember was the sight of her daughter pale and unresponsive, the sound of sirens, the smell of vomit on the kitchen floor. She couldn't bring herself to take down the decorations for days. It was as if a part of her was frozen on that night. The following year, Halloween was different. The neighborhood held a meeting to discuss stricter safety measures. Parents decided to accompany their kids in groups. All candies were to be inspected under bright lights before being eaten. Minnie didn't let her kids roam freely anymore. She still encouraged their independence in other things, but Halloween was no longer about freedom. It was about vigilance. She couldn't unsee what had happened. The story of that Halloween became something people whispered about. It became a cautionary tale. No one ever found out who had spiked the candies. The thought that someone was out there, someone who had deliberately chosen to harm children on a night meant for innocent fun. Do you have a terrifying tale of your own? Send your story to officialmrsSinister@gmail.com. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and tap the bell. Sleep tight, if you can. And remember, the things lurking in the dark are always watching.